Welcome everyone to our my podcast, BIZ Connections, BIZ, BIZ Connections. Today we have Dusty Williams.
Hey everybody.
And Dusty's situated here on this beautiful farm between South Wayne and Browntown along Highway 11. And we're going to talk to Dusty about the ag business because his background, you're an Agribusiness and Farm Management instructor at Blackhawk Tech.
Yes.
In the Monroe branch.
Actually, this is beginning my 12th year there.
12th year,
yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
You're also an advisor for their professional agricultural students. What is that again?
It's a group of students that are enrolled in the agriculture program at the school that have interest in agriculture, and they compete nationwide and statewide on different contests, and everything from crops and soils and dairy and livestock to interviewing, like what we're doing right now, and public speaking and those types of things as well.
The reason I wanted to highlight this with Dusty, there's a lot of misunderstandings, misconceptions about the agricultural business. And we're in the middle of the ag sector right here.
Oh yeah,
Wisconsin,
sure.
You know. So just a little bit on your background, Dusty. Where did you grow up?
I grew up by Hillsboro, Wisconsin, a small little town. My parents actually own a dairy farm up there. They dairy farmed actually for 51 years. They milk cows, and they still own the farm. They retired from that now, but they have actually more beef cattle now than they ever had dairy cattle, and so we get back there quite often and help with a few things here or there. And it's actually situated right next to Wildcat Mountain State Park. If you're familiar with where that's at on Highway 33, it's a beautiful area, lots of rock outcroppings, and just a great place to grow up and spend my time as a kid there.
So you're pretty much your entire youth you grew up on the farm.
Yeah. My great grandfather homesteaded that farm in 1855. And so my dad grew up on that farm. Lots of relatives grew up on that farm, and it's been in the family for a very long time.
Okay.
And there's a lot of history there. My dad could talk to you for days about the history behind the farm and the people that he's researched and things like that too. So
and
it's pretty cool.
They still farm?
My parents, yes.
They still do?
Yeah,
wow,
they do.
Think about that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to do the math on that. They got to be...
Yeah, so my dad I think is 77, and my mom's somewhere around 75-ish or so. Okay. I might be off a year or two there, but right in that area, and they love doing what they do, and for them, the farm is their vacation. They haven't ever really spent a lot of time traveling or that type of thing because they realize how lucky they are to live where they do, and it really is a beautiful place. Yeah.
So that's how agriculture.
I realize that now. Yeah.
Agriculture was in your blood, literally.
Oh yeah, and we had dairy cows and quarter horses, registered quarter horses, and always had about 20 head of those around. And when I was young, I got involved with FFA and did a lot of that in high school, and decided that I was going to go on to college, and initially wanted to become a vet like many other people that love animals. And about 3 years into the vet program, I kind of decided, I'm going to finish this, or the pre-vet program, and I'm going to finish this part, but I'm going to do something different. So went back and spent some time talking to my high school ag teacher, and he kind of pushed me over the cliff and decided to go into the ag education side of things. Because when I was a senior in high school, there was three things I wanted to be: either a vet, or a high school ag teacher, FFA advisor, or a band teacher. Because I played trumpet and was in the national FFA band and all that kind of stuff too. So that was a big deal to me as well. But one of the things I like to talk about often is how people's career paths change. And, I had a change in college, but if you look back to when I was even in middle school, when I was a freshman, middle school age-ish, I wanted to move as far away from the farm as possible. Okay. And I wanted to go to New York City, and I wanted to be a commercial art graphic design person. And I had a passion for art. I loved art. I liked to draw. I loved to do that kind of stuff and work with computers, and that was my goal at that point in life. And when I was a freshman in high school, I wasn't going to take an ag class. I wasn't going to be an FFA, and my dad said, you should really just take one class, and if you don't like it, you don't have to ever do it again, but just try it. And well, then I fell in love with it, and the rest is history. And now I teach agriculture, right? And so people's interests change.
And you started out, where was your first teaching job? Yeah,
so I spent about 5 years in River Falls, University of Wisconsin. River Falls is where I went to school, and I was lucky enough to land an internship at Elkhorn High School.
Yeah.
I taught there with Dave Cruz and had a great experience there for a semester. And then I had the opportunity to come here to South Wayne and become the ag teacher and replaced Dick Meskey here after he had been here for 33 years.
He was my ag instructor.
Yeah, great guy, and very accepting and open arms, willing to take me in and spend time with me too. So had the opportunity to spend 3 years here in South Wayne at Blackhawk High School, and I really wasn't even looking for a job, but this opportunity to start a new agriculture program at a technical college came up in Monroe at Blackhawk Tech, and I applied, and because somebody told me I should, and I got the job.
Sure. So that was a from scratch kind of thing.
Yeah, it really was. They had Chris Wellington was the dean there at the time, and she had worked with one other prior person to kind of get the ball rolling, and we had there's a list of classes, and there was some state approved stuff that had been done, but there was a lot of work to be done yet. Sure. And so we started the 1-year program, and then moved into about 4 or 5 years ago, we started the 2-year program. Yeah.
And I know a lot of kids, this could be an hour-long podcast just on that educational part, 2-year versus 4-year. I mean, a lot of people go to the 4-year that could probably be better served by a 2-year program.
Oh, yeah. And I have students many times that have, tried school other places and didn't always have success. And then they come to us, and we spend a little bit more time one-on-one. It's a little more nurturing environment for some folks that need that. And for those people that like hands-on experiences, the technical college is really where it's at.
Sure.
Everything that we do is hands-on. We're really training people to do specific things, from whether it's being a welder or being a dental hygienist, or working in agriculture and being a custom applicator for an FS of the world or a Landmark.
So it's very precise, that career path. You're picking a specific literally job description, job title.
For sure.
Right?
And the ag program's a little bit more broad than that, but we serve many different facets of the industry, but many of the programs are very specific. But we have advisory committees that are industry folks like yourself that are made up of this committee, and they guide us and tell us what they need these students to have, and the training they need to have, and the certifications they should have, and those types of things. Yeah.
And you're married?
I am. Yeah.
We have the family here.
Yeah.
You guys want to say hi?
Not everybody's here, but some of them are here. So if you guys want to come around, and I'll introduce you.
You just got an all-female bunch here.
So I was fortunate enough to marry my beautiful wife, Amy. And Amy actually had 3 kids from a prior marriage, and they're my bonus children. One of them is here, Brenna.
Hi.
And the other 2, Trevor and Tanner, are a little bit older, and they're off, working in the world and doing some different things. So, and then Amy and I have 2 kids of our own, Delia and Annalene.
Yep.
And I was going to ask him a quick question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So, we live on a little farm here outside of South Wayne. We've got about 25 acres, and we have chickens and horses and ponies and rabbits and dogs and cats, a herd of cats, I should say. And then we also have a small herd of beef cattle too. And so we have a lot of experiences on the farm, just like I did growing up. And I was just going to ask them each what they like about living on a farm. So who wants to start?
Well, my favorite part on the farm is I actually have 2 things. I like to haul manure with Dad, and I like to ride horse.
Nice. Okay.
My favorite thing on the farm is the cows and doing manure with Daddy and going on the tractor with Daddy.
Okay.
My favorite thing is to be able to just have so much land. You can do so many different things on it, and we have so many different kinds of animals. It's just like a variety of things that you can do. Like, you never get bored out here. There's so many things that you can do. So.
Great.
And my favorite thing would be how peaceful it is and the view of the animals in the pastures.
Yeah, great. Yeah, we get to wake up every morning and see what you folks are seeing behind us here, the cattle and the horses and all
Yeah.
that. So it's a great opportunity for folks to be able to live on the land. And you know, we raise our own chickens and butcher our own chickens, and there's nothing better than you know, living off the land and the things that you grow and that type of thing. So the kids would agree too that it always tastes better, right?
Yeah, you butcher your own chickens and all
Yeah.
that, right? Yeah.
Get fresh meat.
Yep.
Okay.
So, all right, guys, thank you.
What do you guys do for fun? You have any? You like to camp, don't you?
Swimming and going in the hot tub.
Don't you camp or not?
Yeah, we actually have a camper in the Dells. It's what's the name of the campsite? I can't remember.
The wagon wheel campground.
Yeah, the wagon wheel camp.
So they're campers.
Yeah,
So we've been doing a little bit of that too.
right next to the lake view.
Yep.
Cool.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. You have any other hobbies, Dusty?
Yeah, I mean, part of my my vices are the fact that I have a lot of hobbies, and it's hard to get time to do all of the things I like to do.
Yeah.
You know, I'm very mechanical. I like to work on old equipment and restore stuff. I restored a 1974 pickup when I started that in high school. I love animals, so I like riding horse and spending time with the horses and that type of thing. And one of my big goals was when we got this place was that I really wanted to kind of provide a lab farm for my kids and also for my kids at school too. So my students come out here oftentimes too, and we do things with the animals, and we do things with the land as well. And and part of my hobby is also just fixing this place up and spending time working on doing those types of things. I love just being outdoors, hunting, fishing. I hunt deer, turkey, bow deer, all that kind of stuff, trout fish. Yeah.
Okay. So
like doing those types of things.
You're busy.
Yeah.
Busy,
yeah.
but doing productive stuff, as I call it.
You know, I love music. I used to be a DJ back when I was in college, so I got involved with music quite a bit.
Okay.
I play trumpet, and so I'd love to be back in a band at some point someday. I've actually played in 3 polka bands in my lifetime.
I'll be darned.
When I was in high school, I played in one, and then when I was in kind of halfway between high school and college, I played in another one, and then Dick Schlim and the Peterson Orchestra, I played without those guys before too. So
you did,
yeah, just for not too long, but
now
for a little
that's
while.
a well-rounded individual there.
Yeah,
man alive.
So lots of different things I like to do.
I never knew that.
Yeah,
I compliment you on that. That's
thanks.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah,
and we're gonna zip over to talk about the ag business.
Okay.
A lot of people don't understand really a lot of the intricacies of the agricultural business. We were talking before this about just in general, like commodities, for instance, and people don't understand how the pricing structure works and why things cost what they do, and there's a lot of misconceptions. You want to talk about?
Yeah, definitely. One of the things I always like to start with is the fact that we have the cheapest, or I should say the most affordable food supply in the world. When you compare us to every other country in the world, we spend the least amount of money on food. It's actually somewhere between 11 to 12% of our income we spend on food. And when you look at other countries in Europe, most of those countries are anywhere from 17 to 20% of their income is on food. So France, for example, is I think 17%. When you go to India, they spend about 51% of their income on food. And so I think one of the things that we need to be really fortunate about is the fact that we do have an affordable food supply and a plentiful food supply, right?
Yeah.
And so sometimes people don't realize that. I hear people complain all the time, milk costs so much, or meat costs so much, or the prices in the grocery store are going up so much. When you really put it in a relative perspective,
Right.
we are by far leaps and bounds the more affordable place to buy food in the world.
And also too the improvements in the technology in the farming, just the crop yields as an example.
Oh, for sure.
it's just-
Yeah. I mean, that's a big deal. When you look at, an average cow in 1958 probably produced less than 10,000 pounds of milk in a year, right?
Okay.
And now an average cow today, I mean, even on a larger dairy, an average cow could produce 30,000 pounds of milk in a year. And it's not necessarily because, we're not doing anything for as far as genetic modification to make that happen. You hear people talk about GMOs a lot, and we can talk more about that. But it's not because we're putting GMOs in them or anything like that. We're not pumping them full of antibiotics like you see some, things on the internet. That's not true. It's just a simple thing as far as genetics, right? So just genetically looking at selecting for the right traits for these animals to be able to produce more milk and to produce more meat and to be able to provide more for people. And so it's just the advancements in just simple selective breeding over the last 50 years that have brought us to where we're at today.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's all it is. And better feed, no different than humans even. We have kids that are growing taller than all of us, and our kids eat better than we did even growing up.
Yeah, you don't think about it that way.
Yeah, you don't. You
look back, compare it to, you look at pictures of when the kids that are playing basketball now seem to be a foot taller.
Yeah, it's better nutrition is a lot of it, and really that's a big part of the production on farms too. If you feed an animal well, they're going to produce well, and there's organizations out there that try to bash farmers and bash agriculture, and they say that people mistreat their animals, but there's no right-minded person that would ever mistreat their animals, because if you treat them well, they're going to produce well.
Okay.
And if you treat them well, humanely, and you feed them well, they're going to produce more than the next cow, right, or the next animal.
Yep.
And so it's important for people to understand that farms are these people's livelihood, and there's no reason for them to do that, and to mistreat an animal or not feed an animal. If they're really truly a good farmer, they're going to want to get the most production out of that animal, right?
Correct.
And so it behooves them or benefits them to treat them well and also feed them well.
Yep.
And 99% of the population that's out there does that. But there's always one bad apple or one person that does bad things. But it's important for consumers to understand that the majority of farmers are in it to produce goods and services, or goods for the consumer that is wholesome, it's nutritional, and safe for them to consume.
Yeah. I know I grew up growing up on a farm myself. We really didn't have the technology we used. Farmers back then, 50 years ago, I'm talking, I don't think they had the technology they did back then compared to what they have now.
Not at all. And even if you did have the technology, the genetics for some of these animals were not there either.
Correct.
And so if you look at what a beef cow looked like in 1950 versus what a beef cow looks like today, you would wonder what somebody did to that animal to make it different, right?
Yep.
It's simply breeding, right?
Okay.
Even
Okay.
another very common misconception, if you look up on the internet, look up pictures of chickens, right? And people there's pictures of these large plump chickens on there, and with it's like a cartoon of injection needles going into these chickens.
Okay.
And the misconception is that we put injection needles into chickens to make them big and plump. That's not even remotely true. First of all, chickens are not genetically modified. They're not fed genetically modified. I mean, the GMO corn might be part of their diet, but we can talk more about that too.
Yeah.
But they're not pumped full of antibiotics. It's illegal to feed antibiotics to chickens. Okay. They are fed a wholesome diet, but the misconception is that you've got this picture of this big plump chicken compared to this scrawny, skinny little chicken, right?
Right.
And this scrawny, skinny little chicken is represented by a chicken from 1960, and this big plump chicken is a chicken of today, right?
Yeah,
Well, there's two complicated things here for the consumer to understand. Is that number one, we have meat birds. We have breeds of chickens that are meat birds,
Right.
And then we have breeds of chickens that are layers. The layers have absolutely no meat on them at all. They're putting their they're putting their nutrition into making an egg, right?
Sure. Okay.
Whereas the meat birds are putting their nutrition into making making meat, right? No different than the beef cows out here. They're big and plump, and they've got lots of muscle because they're beef cows. They're raised for meat. Now, dairy cows would look a lot different. They're skinny. And sometimes people say, why are your dairy cows so skinny? You should feed them more. Well, the reality is that those cows would be unhealthy if they were fed more. And if dairy cows get too fat, they won't reproduce.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And a lot of people don't understand that.
Okay.
And so kind of back to this chicken thing.
Yeah.
When there's the whole layer versus meat bird thing, but there's also the genetics, right? So a meat bird from 1950 compared to today is probably 10 pounds different. I mean, it's drastically, it's not even the same bird.
Yeah, I never had any insight into that at all.
Just simply because of selective breeding. So you or I taking this female and this male, mating them together because both of these have,
which is smart.
bigger chicken breasts or whatever.
Yeah.
And so we mate them together to produce offspring that have bigger chicken breasts. And
you're using human nature to your advantage, basically.
Yeah, and we've been selectively breeding animals for 10,000 years. I mean, you look at dogs and cats and cattle and all the domesticated species have been domesticated in some way, shape, or form from anywhere from 10,000 to 15,000 years.
Yes.
And what's kind of interesting is that, we do that with domesticated farm animal species, and we also do it with dogs, right? There are something like over 500 different breeds of dogs in the world. And most consumers are perfectly fine with buying whatever breed of dog, but it's the selective breeding that got them to where those dogs are. So when you have little dogs and big dogs, all little dogs that exist in the world really came from about a dozen or so small dogs that were bred specifically in some Chinese monastery that were taken and captured by European invaders. And they took those dogs, bred them with other types of dogs, and created all kinds of different breeds. And so when we look at selective breeding on farms for producing a specific thing like meat, right? We do that. And same thing with dogs. They breed a specific dog for a specific reason, right?
Yep.
It's either to look this way or to act this way or to be a cow dog or whatever, right? They weren't born that way. Humans did that. And
that's one of the reasons when you think about the prices at the store being what they are.
Yeah.
Our food supply we take for granted.
We do.
We absolutely do.
We do. And,
You know?
and the great thing about living and owning an agricultural business in the United States is that we have the freedom to succeed and the freedom to fail, right?
Yep.
And we also have the freedom to choose how we want to farm, right? In some other countries in the world, the government dictates to the farmer exactly how they are supposed to farm. But what's great here is we have the ability to have folks that are, large scale producers, small scale producers. We've got people that are in between. We've got organics, non-organics. We've got community supported agriculture. We have all kinds of things where, if you decide you want to farm a certain way, great, then you farm that way. If I want to farm differently, then I farm that way.
Yeah, you sink or swim on your own merits.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically.
Yep. And
Isn't Canada's system different, right?
so Canada has a quota system for their milk, in particular, and I'm not familiar if there's any differences in other commodities, but and it's a system that's been in Europe as well, and there's so we could talk a little bit about the conceptions of that too, because some folks believe the quota system is the answer to everything because you're only producing a certain amount, so you regulate the supply, and you're getting a set amount price for your milk, right?
Yeah.
And Canadians get that, but what people don't understand is that quota costs something, right? And so if I wanted to start a farm in Canada and my family did not own a farm, I would have to go out and I'd have to buy quota from somebody. I'd have to get your quota, for example.
You'd
right?
have to buy your way in.
They don't just create new quota. The government has a set amount, and we can only produce this much, right? So the last time I had heard a quota for one cow in Canada was $30,000
For one cow.
for one cow. That's not to buy the cow. That's
just
to
to get-
buy the rights to be able to produce milk from one cow.
Whoa.
Okay, so you see where the issue lies is that anybody that wants to try to get in, like a young person or somebody that doesn't have a farm already, there's zero beginning
You
farmers.
have no chance almost.
No chance. Yeah.
Wow. Wow,
now
that's freedom versus not having freedom.
Yeah.
Basically.
Now here, I mean, people could argue too that there's very little chance for a beginning farmer to get started here too because the capital cost is so great.
Yeah.
The upfront cost, but still there is still that right and that ability, and people are reluctant to give away that freedom, right?
Yeah.
And so I'll give you another example. So I know a young farmer that he went to UW Platteville, graduated, built a small freestall barn, had like 100 cows, then wanted to expand. Right,
Okay.
so he built another building, added onto his freestall barn, and he now has two, and he's got I think around 300 cows or so. Right, so who are we to tell him that he can't expand?
Correct. Yeah.
And then he can't better himself
Yeah,
and grow.
It's no business different
As a
than running a
no
conventional.
different than your insurance business.
Insurance business. If I want to expand, who is it for someone to tell me no, you can't go into this town, or you can't add this many people under your payroll?
And iconically, people like to see this. I mean, if you look around, you'll see the old dairy barn that's up here, and they like to see the little red barns and the little barnyards and 20 cows, and that's great. But the reality is that it doesn't sustain itself anymore financially to do that, unless they're going to do something to create a niche. Bring people into their farm, or do farm stays, or sell their product direct to the consumer. Those types of things as well.
Yeah.
But that's the reality. Now in Europe and Canada, where quota systems have existed, there are a lot of small farms, and that's what a quota system does. Is it keeps the small farms small. But it would be like me telling you that when you started your insurance business, you only have a set amount of clients and you can have no more.
Yeah,
right?
it's putting a lid on it.
Correct. And so, do the small farms make a good living and survive? Probably. But there's also no, free enterprise system.
Free enterprise,
right?
What
we call laissez-faire system here in the United States. We don't have that.
Yep.
or we wouldn't have that if we did a quota system. So there's advantages and disadvantages to both, for sure.
Yeah,
One thing related to that. Sorry to interrupt you,
No.
but Canada sells a gallon of milk for about $8 for a gallon of milk.
That's a huge difference from.
Oh, yeah.
United. Oh,
Yeah, and so they can, if they live close to the border, they can come across the border and they can buy I think it's 8 gallons and take it back across, and they do that because they can buy it for a lot cheaper here. But we can produce that milk at a lot lower cost to the consumer because there's economies of scale, and we have a free enterprise system, and so somebody pays the price. Right, whether it's the government or the consumer or the farmer, in every system, there's somebody that's paying the price.
and really, if you think about it, farming is no different than if you just compare it to other business models.
Yeah,
People forget that.
but people don't. People don't consider small farms, and in particular small businesses. They consider them a way of life, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And so.
Yeah.
That's probably the mistake that a lot of small farms have made over the years is that they consider it a way of life, right? And they don't necessarily dive into the finances of the business and really look at, okay, what's making me money, what's not, what do I need to do to improve, what do I need to do to change. Many times it's even unfortunately throughout this tough time where we've had some tough prices in ag, a lot of times folks get in denial and they'll say things like, we've always been able to, as long as I work hard, I've always been able to provide. But the problem is that we've had more down years in recent years than we have had up years. And my dad would probably tell you that too, that, throughout the 60s and 70s and even some of the 80s years where he farmed, there were more better years than bad years.
Yes,
and so in some ways, the folks that had that opportunity, they lucked out, right? Don't get me wrong, it's not easy to farm, and there's a lot of tough decisions that you have to make financially and whatnot, but when you're up against a wall where prices are bad for several years in a row, it's pretty tough to overcome that. You know, and because people live on the farm, they have a more of a tie to it, and they consider it more of a way of a life than a business. And they say things like, well, what else am I going to do? I'm only a farmer. But the reality is that only farmers are incredibly qualified to do a lot of things. And a farmer might consider themselves only a farmer, but really they're jacks of all trades. And they're incredibly qualified to do lots of things mechanically and run equipment, and they don't often give themselves enough credit for what skills they do have.
If you had to hire everything out
individually, farm kids are the same way. And they say, well, I'm just a farm kid. Well, when you grow up on a farm, you kind of get sometimes beaten down by the amount of work you got to do, and parents and riding you about stuff all the time. And
you learn a lot of different skills.
You do, but you feel like you're just a farm kid, right? After mom and dad have been through with you.
It's a label. It's a label.
But when they come to college, I'm like, no, you're not just a farm kid. You are a farm kid that is incredibly hireable by many different companies. And kids don't realize that.
Because the agricultural sector has a lot of options now for kids, young and old alike, not just kids, but anybody that wants to get into that field.
I find myself oftentimes having to build them up because their confidence level and their skill set is not great. But we get them good jobs and things too. But I digressed there a little bit.
There's great options. I mean, there's so many different parts of the agricultural business. We could do 2 or 3 podcasts on different subjects. We just drove through Illinois and Iowa yesterday, and you see all the corn, the soybeans, and endless rows of corn. And I know the renewable energy sector's growing, and that actually helps. The agricultural business isn't just food.
Oh yeah, food and
people
fuel,
forget,
fiber. The clothing you're wearing.
Yeah.
Many of those things are made. There's corn in particular has over 3,000 different uses, just in modern day society.
Yeah.
And so it gets used for a lot of different things. It's not just food. It's not just ethanol. The feed that is left over from the ethanol, the distiller's grain that gets fed to the cattle. Lots of great benefits from all that. Sometimes people don't realize the other things that come off from that too, like the carbon dioxide that's harvested from ethanol plants and used to put into sodas and things like that too, carbonation. But if we didn't have ethanol, we would have we would have a lot of product and no place to go with it. Again, with genetics, we have come so far from in the 50s. Actually, if you go back even further into the 20s, you'd be lucky if you got 20 bushel of corn off from a field.
Correct.
And now you can get easily close to 200 or 250 or maybe even 300 or more bushels off from a field of corn. And so, and that's all just genetics. And when we talk about things like GMOs, right? Let's go into that a little bit if you're okay with that.
Yep.
So first, when you ask people what is a GMO, they first try to tell you what it stands for, and most people can't even tell you that. And it's a genetically modified organism, right? And so it can be modified in a few different ways, but essentially the very simplistic description of what that is we take a corn plant, or any plant for that matter, that we want to try to improve, right?
Sure.
And we want to make that plant maybe resistant to a certain insect, so that insect won't hurt it, like something like a corn rootworm, for example.
Okay.
And so we take that plant, we find another plant that has, or another organism that has a natural resistance to that corn rootworm or that specific insect.
Okay.
And we take this, we find, after sequencing the genome or the genetics of that DNA strand of this other organism, we find specifically where on that gene strand it codes for that specific trait that creates resistance for that insect. Okay. So we've got a trait that's been around for a long time called BT. It stands for Bacillus thuringiensis. It's a bacteria that in the soil that had this specific trait that was resistant to corn rootworms. And scientists found that these corn rootworms wouldn't bother this particular bacteria. They'd actually shy away from it. And so we take this specific trait and we insert only that specific tiny little trait that is coded for that specific gene into this corn plant. Okay? So it's not the whole DNA strand from this other organism. It's not even sections of it. It's the specific part for that thing we're looking for.
Okay.
We take it out, splice it out, and insert it into this corn plant over here. And now we can take the seed from this corn plant, put it in the ground, and it grows, and the insects won't bother it. So the huge benefit to this is that there is no insecticide use. Okay, you probably remember when you were a kid.
Yes, yep.
Growing up on the farm, every farmer used insecticides, right?
Oh yeah.
There is very little insecticide that is sprayed onto fields anymore. There is insecticide that's put onto the seed, so when the seed gets planted in the ground, it has a protective coating so that the insects won't eat the seed while it's trying to germinate. But that's very educational right there. Yeah,
I mean,
but
that's huge.
Oh, it is huge.
It's a huge deal.
And people don't realize that. They think, GMOs are bad for me because, this thing has been modified in a lab and it's going to make me grow green ears or something, Right. And no, it's just simply a change in taking this gene out, putting it in over here to simply do some specific thing. And the other thing that is another misconception that's out there is that there's everything is a GMO anymore.
Yeah.
In fact, there are only 10 crops that have been genetically modified in the world. 10.
Okay, 10.
10. Corn is one of them. Alfalfa is another one. You can buy Roundup Ready alfalfa. So, we modified that alfalfa so it has a specific trait that allows you to spray Roundup on it without killing it. Kills everything else except for the alfalfa, because it's resistant to that trait. And so farmers that are growing alfalfa for seed production or growing alfalfa to haul across state lines, like from the Dakotas to here, and they can't be shipping alfalfa that has weeds in it, it's a great thing for them, because they can grow the alfalfa, they can spray Roundup on it, kills everything, so there's no weeds, no weed seed in it, and they can legally transport it to here or back and forth.
It's a huge
because of that.
Save. It's just a huge saving in time and money and
and quality
quality.
too. Yeah,
right.
Definitely. So there's and papaya in particular is one that's a success story as well. Papaya is genetically modified. It's estimated that the papaya plant would be extinct at this point if they would not have genetically modified it.
Sure. Okay.
There was a disease that came through, and it was incredibly detrimental to even some U.S. Papaya growers in Hawaii and California in that area. They lost thousands of trees and plants, and so they genetically modified it, and now it's resistant to that particular disease.
When I hear you talk about that, it gives me hope for COVID.
Well, yeah, I mean, because there's opportunity there. And they'll find
it's
something.
a whole different. That's a whole different subject. But just think of
fighting a virus is a lot different than any specific,
but just,
fungus or that type of thing. Yeah,
just think of the scientific, the wisdom that goes into.
Oh yeah, lots of science that goes into. I mean, people have most consumers have no idea how much science goes into ag, and everything we do is science-based, and that's part of the frustration, I think, too, from consumers, is that we talk about science too much, right? As agriculture producers, everything we do is science-based, and so we talk about it a lot.
Sure.
And so sometimes, the consumer takes that as, oh, well, you're talking over here. I'm here. I don't really understand what you're talking about. When I start talking about BT corn, you glaze over and you're gone.
Deer in the headlights, yeah.
Yeah, and so I don't blame them for not understanding, because for years our industry has pushed science, right?
Correct.
Onto the consumer and onto everybody, and we need to do a better job at relating to the consumer and saying, I feel this way and I understand this way, because I feel this is the best thing for my farm and the best thing for you as a consumer too.
It's clear. I think it cleared a lot of the fog. Yeah. I call it that. I learned a lot. And I thought I knew a little bit about farming, but I really didn't. Yeah. And I grew up on a farm, so
it's changed so much.
Yeah. So
I've got one more thing if you got time.
Yeah.
So one other thing that is incredibly frustrating for consumers is food labeling. Okay.
Oh yeah.
So when you go to the grocery store and you look at a package of food and you read it, what does all that mean, right?
Yeah, you can't spell half the words.
Well, I mean, the nutritional analysis on the back is standardized, and that's law, and it's backed up, and it's policed, and all that kind of stuff. But really, the only thing that is policed on a food label is the guaranteed analysis. So when you look at that, what the protein and what the carbohydrate and the ingredients and all that is monitored and approved by the USDA, FDA, all that kind of stuff. Okay. So what isn't is all the other stuff. So when you go to the store and you see on the shelf a package of butter that says gluten-free on that package of butter. Yep. Well, I hate to break it to you, but all butter is gluten-free. There's no gluten in butter. It's made out of milk, right? So gluten is a part of a corn kernel, of the coating of the kernel that some people do have intolerances to. People that have Crohn's and celiacs and things like that have intolerances to gluten. Right, and people have found that if they eat less gluten, they sometimes might feel a little bit better, because we do eat a lot of gluten. We eat a lot of breads and carbohydrates and all that kind
Sure.
of stuff,
Yeah,
right?
it was
and,
loaded,
and,
yep.
and a lot of that all has that kind of stuff in it, and it might not be necessarily the gluten. It might just be too much carbohydrates in the diet too, and I'm not going to get into that too much, but the fact of the matter is that when you look at a package, take it for what it's worth, because it may not be telling you the exact thing that you really need to know, because
Okay.
it's marketing, right? So why did the company put gluten-free on this package of butter? What do you think?
Yeah, just
To
to
get
sell
you
it.
to buy
sell
it,
it, yeah.
right? Because
Right.
if you're looking for gluten-free
Right.
stuff, and you say, "Oh, they came out with gluten-free
wow.
butter,"
You're like, whoa, this is.
I'm going to buy this
this
one
is gonna save me a lot of
over the other
misery.
one that doesn't say gluten-free, right? But in all reality, none of them have gluten in them, and it's a marketing ploy.
That's a sleight of hand, as
So,
you call it. Yeah.
so there are other things like when you see something that says farm fresh, it doesn't necessarily mean it came from a small farm. If it had a little red barn on the package, it doesn't mean it came from a little red barn. If it says, grass fed, I mean, it might mean that it is, but there's no real certification. The only certification that exists really in the United States is organic. So when you see that little green and brown seal that says USDA organic certified, that's really
they have more stringent.
There's a stringent guidelines and testing and monitoring. I mean, we could talk about how sometimes anything can have a conspiracy theory behind it, right?
Sure.
But, just like Trump talking about the voting and all the fraud that's going on, well, who knows if there is or if there isn't? But somebody could always doctor or taint whatever. But the fact of the matter is there are very strict guidelines for organics in the United States.
Okay.
And you have to be certified, and you're tested, and you are inspected on a regular annual basis, and you have to go through trainings and whatnot to get there. And it's a lot of work and a lot of money to be organic too. Because you have to go for 3 years without using any antibiotics on your farm, any commercial fertilizers on your field.
That's more legitimate.
Yeah. Oh, it is.
That's
very
legitimate.
Yes, very legitimate. If you're looking to buy specifically organic things, USDA organic seal is pretty solid, right?
Okay.
But if you see anything else on a package that doesn't say USDA certified, it means nothing. Right,
Sure. Okay.
A picture of the quintessential little red barn with the rolling hills means nothing, right? Those eggs that are in that package could have been raised in a large confinement, facility.
Yes.
The gluten-free thing, the grass-fed. There are some industry standardized grass-fed types of things, but they're going to have a little seal. If it just says grass-fed, doesn't really mean that it is.
It's a marketing.
It's a marketing thing. GMO-free, right? Okay. We just got done talking about how there are only 10 genetically modified things known to man that are modified. Well, no chicken is genetically modified. Yet you hear on TV, and you go to the store and look on the package, GMO-free chicken, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, right.
Or antibiotic-free chicken. Well, you can't use antibiotics. You can't feed antibiotics to chickens anyway.
They're repeating something that everybody else has.
Correct.
Right. I mean,
correct. And so if you're the first one to put that on your package, you're going to get more sales because the consumer automatically thinks, well, if it doesn't have antibiotics, it's better for me. If it's not GMO, it's better for me. Right? But in all reality, none of that is GMO, and none of it is fed antibiotics. No, I'm not going to say that antibiotics are not used at all, because if an animal is sick and they're not organic, people are going to treat their animals.
Sure.
Like if one of my cows out here is sick, I'm not going to just let it die. Right. No different than you wouldn't just let your kid die.
Yeah, you want to give them medicine.
You would give them something to keep them alive, right?
Yeah,
because, I mean, heck, you can die from pneumonia if you don't get some antibiotics in you.
Right. Yep.
So, and the same thing with cattle and chickens and all that. So farmers will treat their animals, but it's not like we just feed, pump antibiotics into.
Right,
into
we're not
them.
injecting them.
Yeah, unless they're organic. So, organic ones cannot be treated ever with antibiotics.
Okay.
And so if the consumer wants something like that, then they need to buy organic, and then they can pretty much guarantee that they haven't had antibiotics.
And usually, of course, it's
Yeah.
priced accordingly, usually too.
Yeah. So
yeah.
So I
Yeah.
we know we talked about a lot, and,
Yeah.
and we could probably
Yeah.
talk more, but
This
it's been fun.
This has been hopefully educational. We're going to probably do a couple more of these in the future if you got
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, for sure. I'd be happy to do that.
We could really. We've only covered a couple areas here.
Yes. Yeah.
And I always like to have fun at the end here. We're losing our sunlight. Oh, we do have a light here.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway, I was going to ask if you had one maybe truth or piece of advice you could pass along.
Get to know your farmer, right? Go find a farmer and get to know them, right? So many people live in this country today, and they live out in the countryside or even in town, and they don't even get to know their neighbors, right?
Yeah,
So
sure.
it's not like it used to be where everybody knew everybody, and
Yeah, right.
you could just drive into your neighbor and sit and chat with them for a while. But we've got all kinds of folks that are from the city that they move out in the countryside and they want to enjoy the country life, right? But everybody kind of keeps to themselves and does their own thing, and you might have a farmer that's right down the road like me. Like I've got 11 head of cattle out here. I'm going to have a
Yeah.
steer ready to butcher in March, right?
Sure.
And so if you're my neighbor and you'd like to buy a quarter of a steer or a half a steer, I would sit down with you and explain exactly what you need to know, how it's going to be done,
Yep.
and what it would cost and all that kind of stuff. And I think many consumers don't realize those opportunities exist, right? And during this COVID time,
Okay.
it has pushed people to get a little bit more concerned about that. When you had beef shortages and
Yes, yeah,
pot roasts
yeah,
that
yeah.
are $100 in the store.
Yes.
And
yeah.
so lots of farmers were feeding, or not feeding, but literally feeding, but selling quarters and halves to local consumers,
Okay.
right? And so sometimes consumers don't even know that's a possible thing they can do, right? And go and buy from your local farmer. You can't buy milk because it has to be pasteurized, but cheeses and local goods and half a pork or
Especially beef.
maple sugar, maple syrup, and honey, and all kinds of things that are grown locally. The chickens, for that matter.
People eat a lot of chicken.
Yeah, they're all over the place. People are always selling chickens, and so get to know your local farmer. They want to get to know you because they would rather sell to you than to sell to the market, because they can cut out the middleman and they can make more profit if they sell right to you.
Good point.
And that's why I do what I do, because I can make more money selling to my neighbors than I can taking it to the market and letting somebody else make that
We've
money.
Our family has always bought from a couple different farmers.
Yep.
And the quality is excellent.
Yeah.
And I tell you what.
Or go to your local butcher shop, right?
Sure.
So you know where your food comes from.
Yeah.
And because that steer or that pig came from somewhere around the local area. Here's another little fact for you, Ron.
What's that?
The average bite of food in the United States travels 1,500 miles.
1,500 miles.
Every bite of food, on average, across the United States, every bite of food you put in your mouth, there's 1,500 miles. There's 1,500 miles. Yes.
Okay, now that's interesting.
So when I say get to know your local farmer, buy local, get to know your local farmer, get to make a connection with them. You're going to have better quality because it's fresh, it's local, you're supporting a local entity.
And it's more efficient.
It is more efficient
Way more
to some
efficient.
degree. And I'm also not trying to bash the big farmer or the Walmarts of the world or whatever, because they all serve their own purpose, and it's a great place to buy products and things like that too. And food, like I said, it's safe and it's affordable.
But be aware. Be aware of it. Yeah.
But be aware that if you want that opportunity to be able to do that it's there.
Yeah, that's a
sure.
very good point.
Yeah.
So I want to thank Dusty.
Yeah, no
we'll
problem.
do this again.
Anytime.
And
my porch is open.
Yeah, yeah. This is Ron Denner, your host for BIZ Connections, and I just want to remind you I'll be doing another podcast next Wednesday. It'll be personal growth recipes, and I'll announce my next BIZ Connections podcast when I do my little Facebook spiel I do on Saturdays, so probably in a couple weeks. And you can find me on Facebook, YouTube, under BIZ Connections. And until then, this is Ron Denner, and thanks again, Dusty.
Thanks a lot.
Signing off.